the world's most powerful man against the world's richest man. It's a pretty unedifying spectacle.
There are lots of people in America right now who are looking at what Trump is trying to do with this big, beautiful bill, who might actually agree with what Musk is saying. If Musk is posing enough of a risk to make people say, OK, I don't feel able to vote for it, or if he's actually going to push people into the Trump camp and say, well, if I've got Musk on the other side, I'm going full on MAGA.
But I mean, again and again, how many people have stood up to Trump when it's come to it?
Donald Trump loves nothing more than speaking to reporters on the White House lawn within earshot of Marine One. This time, he's really got it in for his old friend Elon Musk.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem. It blows up, So I'm going to give that one to Peter.
And the question to Donald Trump that elicits the response of, I'm going to look at that, is, would you consider deporting Elon Musk? Things have got very sour indeed. Elon Musk is opposing Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, and Donald Trump has got it in for Elon Musk. Where does this go next? Welcome to the News Agents. It's John.
It's Emily. And if the world has been feeling quite quiet recently over the other side of the pond, that uneasy truce between Musk and Trump was pretty much shattered this morning. It has been a long night in Congress where senators have been trying to pass the big, beautiful bill. It is Trump's bill. He's very proud of it. And right now, it is all hanging on a knife edge. And maybe that explains why there was a little bit of grumpy tiredness this morning when Trump was looking at the man who essentially is trying to pull the whole thing down. Not from inside government this time, but from outside. Musk has called his bill an abomination, a disgusting abomination. And Trump basically let rip.
I mean, Elon Musk, having backed off and having gone too far in the spat that was so delicious the other week, where, Elon Musk is more or less accusing Donald Trump of being a paedophile because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and then says, well, maybe I didn't mean it and maybe I've gone too far. So Elon Musk went quiet. He's got noisy again. And he's saying that if this big, beautiful bill, which he thinks, as you say, Emily, is an abomination, gets passed, then he's setting up a new political party in America tomorrow, and that he is going to be running candidates against all the Trump people who voted for it. That's a big threat when you've got as much money as Elon Musk has got. And Donald Trump feels really pissed off with Elon Musk and wants to just traduce him now.
Yeah, he's told him to close up shop and go back to South Africa. I think it was Steve Bannon originally who suggested that Elon Musk was basically another illegal immigrant. He told us on the show a couple of weeks back that he should be deported. He should get the hell out of America. And I guess what we are going to have to get used to is this idea of two people fighting a war where neither one is a winner that you particularly feel any empathy for. There are lots of people in America right now who are looking at what Trump is trying to do with this big, beautiful bill, who might actually agree with what Musk is saying. Because I'm going to stop calling it the big, beautiful bill because I sound ridiculous. But essentially, it's a massive, massive increase the deficit up to 5 trillion now. This bill would bring it up by 3 trillion. So there are a lot of fiscal hawks that think they don't want to see America going into debt. And they have a very, innately conservative opposition to what Trump is trying to do. And then there are lots of people, particularly on the Democrat side, I guess, although some Republicans as well, saying this is going to massively hurt the poorest in America. It's tax cuts for the wealthy, but it would kill for many people, Medicaid, i.e. exactly the kind of welfare discussion we've been having here in Britain, by making 17 million people worse off, on the poverty line, because it would be taking away their ability to get healthcare and benefits.
Look, in terms of the battle between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, the Henry Kissinger quote about the Iran-Iraq war comes to mind, which is, it's a shame both sides can't lose. Because frankly, Elon Musk and Donald Trump have both been, the world's most powerful man against the world's richest man. It's a pretty unedifying spectacle. But it is remarkable, Emily, just to think that what Donald Trump is doing, I mean, it's Robin Hood in reverse, isn't it? I mean, Robin Hood in reverse in that it's tax cuts for the wealthiest and welfare cuts for the poorest to pay for it. And potentially, though, the really ruinous part, and it's not that Elon Musk is concerned about those who'll be left particularly vulnerable, it's because of the rise in the deficit and the consequence that could have for the US economy, where, if we saw what happened in Britain with unfunded tax cuts under Liz Truss and the bond markets taking fright, will this be the latest moment that the bond markets look at US treasuries, look at the debt profile and say, this is unsustainable? And that is the economic argument that Musk is making over the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah. And, as we talk, the dollar is pretty weak at the moment. The US economy, whether as a result of what people think is coming at them in terms of the tariffs or whatever, is looking pretty weak. Now, you could say that's part of the whole Trump strategy longer term, to sort of weaken the US dollar, to make manufacturing come back, reshore, all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, it doesn't point to an economy that's going in the right direction. And what is always unmissable is how personal these rows get. So Trump has taken to Truth Social and he said, no more rocket launchers, satellites or electric car production, and our country would save a fortune, block caps. Perhaps we should have Doge take a good hard look at this. Big money to be saved. In other words, he's setting his dogs on Elon Musk and all his businesses. So every bit of federal money that was coming Musk's way now sounds like it's going to dry up. He's going to be doged. He's going to have his, the tax put on him in the same way that he did on bits of federal government.
Yeah, the thing that's so interesting, and the reason that I argued originally that I thought that there wouldn't be a big falling out between Trump and Musk, is that they each wanted what the other had. Trump wanted the access and the positive coverage on X, and Musk had control of the algorithm and was able to shape that. And Musk wanted the government contracts from NASA and others for SpaceX and other things. And wanted the EV subsidies, the EV mandate, electric vehicle mandate, which would help Tesla. Now, the EV mandate is going. If Donald Trump starts pulling the plug on SpaceX contracts and the like, that does start to become serious. And, Elon Musk's dad reflected in an interview, I think when he was in Russia, that in a battle between the world's richest man and the world's most powerful man, the world's most powerful man wins. And so, Musk probably needs to be a little bit careful. But if this threat comes true, that he's going to set up a rival political party to the Republicans to take them on over their spending, and it becomes a danger and a threat to the Republican Party. And that is something that I would imagine there'll be a good many senators and even more congressmen and women who, frightened though they are of Donald Trump, are also frightened about the financial firepower that Elon Musk can bring to bear to their political careers.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, politics is nothing if not entertaining when it gets to this level of personal abuse. Elon Musk is calling Trump's Republicans the Porky Pig Party. The Porky Pig Party, because essentially he has donated, 300 million in the past to the Republicans in the 2024 election. And if he decided to basically sniper off everyone that voted for the bill, he could throw a lot of money at whoever was primarying them. Now, Musk doesn't always find electoral success, I think it's fair to say. He threw a lot of money at a Wisconsin election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court earlier this year. And, he went there and did a lot of jumping up and down with a black MAGA cap, and it didn't work, right? All that money to nothing. And at that point, I think Musk thought he was going to sort of pull away from the campaign financing side of his business and sort of go back to cars and rockets. But if he does, I guess the question is that going to be enough to frighten those who do want to support the bill into not supporting the bill? And essentially, I mean, let's be honest, you've got sort of two cult leaders here, right, fighting it out like samurais. You've got the MAGA cult lot who basically, I'm going to guess, many of whom have not read the 1,000 pages, right? The 1,000 pages of bill, which is undergoing changes all the time.
Do you think Donald Trump has read the 1,000 pages
I mean,
of bill?
you have to wonder, right? But you've got people in the Republican Party who already feel slightly concerned by what is going on. Tom Tillis, who's a senator who's now said, I'm not going to stand again. I cannot in all conscience go back to my people, my constituents and say we're going to cut Medicaid. He's decided that he'll vote against the bill, and he is then going to essentially not run the midterms next year. And then you've got these curious people who inhabit a very odd sort of grey territory in the Republican Party. Lisa Murkowski, who's the Alaska senator, and Susan Collins of Maine, who both look as if they're sort of struggling to find the spine to stand up to Trump, but never quite do. So Murkowski is one of those senators that is saying, we need an opt-out for my state of Alaska and then I can sign it. Susan Collins is looking for her own sort of fudge. And the reason why I'm naming individuals is because, frankly, it comes down to a wafer-thin majority of 3. So it only takes 3 non-votes for Trump to lose this bill. And you have to wonder, if Musk is posing enough of a risk to make people say, OK, I don't feel able to vote for it, or if he's actually going to push people into the Trump camp and say, well, if I've got Musk on the other side, I'm going full on MAGA.
With these bills, and I think the Porky Pig comment is a reference to pork barrel politics,
as opposed to Trump.
Which is we don't really have it in the same way in the UK. But I mean, it's like, if you get behind me on this piece of legislation, we'll make sure that you get a dual carriageway around the town that has long been campaigning
You'll get a spaghetti junction. You'll get a hospital.
You'll get a hospital. You'll get this. Yeah. You'll get your local projects. And so, and that's the old pork barrel politics. You promise people a little bit of pork for your own district, and then you'll be able to go away happy. And that is the bribing process or cajoling process of American politics writ large. And, it's obvious that is what Trump and his acolytes, his legislative affairs team are doing in Congress right now to try and win over all these people who instinctively think this is a crazy idea but are too terrified to go up against Donald Trump. And you're right, the numbers are wafer thin in the Senate. But I mean, again and again, how many people have stood up to Trump when it's come to it? You go back to in the first term when he was trying to repeal Obamacare, and John McCain was the person who, in the vote, the late John McCain, who put his thumbs down and said, I'm not going to vote for this. And Trump was seething and scathing and really went after McCain as a result of it. So, if you vote against Trump, the dogs of hell are going to be unleashed upon you. And it's going to be unpleasant.
Yeah. And I guess the trouble with the Musk position is, I mean, I think he always, as a businessman and as a sort of wannabe politician, he's always been on the fiscal hawk side, right? He doesn't like the deficit. But when he came into Doge promising to find $2 trillion worth of cuts, he couldn't. We had Michael Lewis on recently, who's basically been inside federal government, studying the people that are working there, writing about it for his book, Who is Government? And actually, what he says is Musk came in and he made all the cuts in the wrong places. He cut the newest people in because he could. He cut the people who were at the cutting edge of sort of technology and sort of new ways of thinking. He left all the stuff that was untouchable. Musk didn't find the savings that he wanted to find. So he kept bringing down what he was aiming for, the $2 trillion, dollars worth of cuts, to I think he ended up with 600. A lot of jobs went, but not a lot of money was saved, which is the opposite, really, of what you're trying to do.
But the madness that's now happening in Washington is that a lot of these people are, out of necessity, being rehired by government. So they then get a payoff. They've had a payoff to, piss off and go and kind of tend the garden. And now they're getting extra money to go back to do the jobs they were originally doing. And so there are areas of public life where Doge is costing money. It's not saving money, it's costing money because of the way that Elon Musk has gone about it. So you've got these two less than ideal role models to choose between in Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
So do you think, let's just put this out there, do you think there is going to be a third party in the US this year? A Musk party? What was the name? America Great? America First? America... what is it?
What was the name?
Is it time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle, says the richest man in the world? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Is he going to do that? Because Trump basically said there'll be all hell to pay. And last time he said that, he bombed Iran.
Look, I think that, we look at our politics in the UK and you look at the most recent kind of council and mayoral elections, and in Britain it felt like we were in 5-party politics. In Wales and Scotland it felt like you were in 6-party politics. America still remains stubbornly Democrat or Republican. We've seen third-party candidates who've never really stood a chance of winning power but stop other people gaining power. And you look at the Ross Perot's in history or others who've had that effect. Ralph Nader, exactly.
Most sort of critically, I'd say, in the 2000 election,
Yeah.
right? A lot of Democrats who went for somebody who was very progressive on the left then got blamed by the by the Gore people for losing him the election.
Exactly. So they have a power a negative power. Whether you could create a third party that would take power is another matter altogether. But look, Musk has money, and in America, we all know money talks.
I mean, I do think, just as a last thought, this raises a really interesting, back to your original point, which was we are at this nexus of trying to work out whether executive office or pure wealth is the stronger force in American politics right now. And if you had to bet on it, I think you'd probably say that Trump as president is more powerful than Musk as the richest man. But the fact that we're even debating that suggests somewhere along the lines that we've now entered an era where actually wealth doesn't have to heed politics anymore, right? Wealth can do its own thing, whoever is in charge. Even if Donald Trump is the most powerful person in the world, could he be flawed by more money?
I mean, the original idea of the people, for the people, and what you've got in America today is a pissing contest between the richest and the most powerful. It has very little to do with the founding fathers' idea of the people and for the people.
In a moment, we'll be asking if that whole broken Britain narrative is going to define our next election. Is it fair? Is it being confected? And if so, what should those in power actually do?
So this morning, Keir Starmer sat down with his cabinet colleagues and gave a state of the nation kind of address to them about how well they had done over the past year, how much better things had become, the achievements, the trade deals, the way that certain measures had been well received. And of course, this comes against the backdrop where you think, well, hang on, isn't there a major crisis going on with Keir Starmer's own authority at the moment because of the welfare bill? And a lot of noise is off from all sorts of commentators where you say, is Britain going in the right direction? No. Is Britain broken? Yes. What is wrong with this country? Is it going to the dogs? Yes. People seem to be unhappy, and it's being harnessed upon. And it's being harnessed by a lot of groups on the right of British politics who seem to want to suggest that Britain has somehow in the last 12 months become broken. And I guess the question is, is this real or confected? And whether it's real or confected, what does Starmer do about it if it's representing a real threat to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should look at some of the facts, which is the level of dissatisfaction that a lot of people genuinely have in the country at the moment. For a lot of people, Britain does feel broken. More in common, the polling experts said that 71% of voters they spoke to feel like things are getting worse in the UK, only 10% believing that things are getting better. So that maybe is your backdrop to why this is such a sort of an easy narrative for those who want power, who are not in power, to kind of get on the back of. And I think there's clearly a lot of deep unease and deep frustration with many people's lives. They are looking at the highest tax burden. They're looking at generational unfairness. They're looking at a sense that they cannot save. Whatever they are doing, however many hours they're working, whatever jobs they're taking on, it doesn't seem to be actually going into the bank at all. And there was a piece, maybe I'm going to say a lesser spotted piece in the Times last week from Boris Johnson's former advisor, Munira Mirza. And it was called Fix Britain. And it's the launch of I don't know what you'd call it, maybe a think tank or maybe a sort of body, which has just been launched, which claims that a combination of the wrong priorities, insufficient bandwidth, hostile scrutiny has paralysed successive governments and sapped the confidence of the public. And it's basically it's basically a how to govern idea. Maybe it has something of Project 25 to it. Maybe it has something of let's get Whitehall out of government and start seeing what political parties are doing. But I think it wants to provide a blueprint, very possibly for an incoming reform government, for an idea of what needs to be done. Now, you've got two things going on at the same time. You've got deep levels of public dissatisfaction for all the things we talked about, whether it's the kind of trains not working on time, whether it's people feeling that they can't get ahead, they can't save, their kids aren't going to be better off than they are, they can't afford houses. And then you've got another narrative, which is, I think, a bit bleaker, a bit darker, which looks into what has become of London, what has become of England. Has it stopped being the England that we all loved? What is Englishness? There is a debate going on in some quarters about whether Rishi Sunak, as a brown-skinned man, could be considered as English as a white-skinned man. And that takes you into a whole different level of declinist Britain in terms of a narrative.
Yeah, declinism. This is the new thing that is being spoken about as not just a statement of apparent fact, we are in decline, the health service, it's harder to get an appointment to see your GP, the trains aren't running on time as you suggested, or the roads are crumbling, or my kids' school, there are problems there, whatever it happens to be.
Everyone's got an answer to isn't Britain crap? Yes, I can't get a signal. Yes, the trains don't run. Yes, but this is a whole different level. This
Exactly.
is a whole kind of creepy xenophobia, which is are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Exactly.
Is it their fault? Who can we blame?
And it feels to me that looking at some of these groups that are trying to make this argument, and we had a jokey outro on the podcast yesterday about how Richard Tice from Reform had kind of said, oh, what's wrong with Britain? There are no more line judges at Wimbledon, as if that was somehow part of it. And I kind of say, oh, Mateless, you're being ridiculous, saying this is more serious than that. And the more I thought about it last night, the more I thought, actually, this is a strategy, that declinism is not just an observation of the state of Britain. It's part of an ideology to try and convince people that Britain is in decline and therefore is in need of rescuing. And so, as you said, Munira Mirza has got Fix Britain. Rupert Lowe, one time of Reform but now squabbled out of the party, is setting up Restore Britain. Ben Habib, who was also part of Reform, has set up Advance UK. And so there are all these different groups on the right of British politics that seem to be kind of clustering around this idea of the inevitable declinism of Britain and that only they can fix it.
Well, to explore this a little bit further, we're joined by the MP Chris Curtis. He's the MP for Milton Keynes. And he is a former YouGov pollster. So, Chris, I know you have a sort of lot of hats in terms of the Labour groups you've been part of and the sort of alliances you've made. But just from your sort of polling days, and I don't know how much that has stayed with you, but when we talk and when we set out these ideas of people feeling worse now than they did, do you recognise that? I mean, the more in common number is 71% of Britons say that they're feeling They're feeling what? They're feeling that Britain is getting worse, not better.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, and I don't think that there is any traction for the left or for the kind of centrist politics I have in denying the existence of this pretty massive problem. I mean, if you just take the economy, for example, productivity, real wages for ordinary working families are about the same now as they were going into the financial crash.
Yeah.
If wages over the last 10 years had grown as quickly as the OECD average, so despite the difficulties, just as quickly as comparable countries, it'd be £5,000 more pounds in the pay pockets of every working family in this country, £40 billion more in the treasury without having to raise a single tax. So, the fact that we have been falling behind, the fact that we have been struggling so much economically, and many of the downwind consequences of that, is a real problem. And I think everybody's feeling that in their everyday lives. So I'm not sure if I'd use the word broken to describe Britain, but I'd certainly say it's down, it's not out. And we've got to have a government that's determined to make pretty radical decisions, often politically difficult decisions, to get us out of that route. And
So, I'm going to put it bluntly, crudely. Are things
yeah, I think lots of things are pretty shit. And it's why you need a government with the determination to unshify it as quickly and as radically as possible. And look, if you talk about from a polling perspective, I know what the consequences will be if we can't start to show real progress on this in the next few years. Nigel Farage could be running this country, and think about the devastating consequences of that man running this country, breaking more things than he fixes. But that's going to happen unless we can start to get more money into the pay packets of working people. We can stop those boats crossing the channel, or significantly get the numbers down. When people go and smash up their local co-op or ATM, nothing seems to happen. We need to fix that problem and the petty crime problem. People feel like their local communities are looking worse, looking more run down than they used to. And whenever you interact with a public service, it doesn't seem to work.
So
we need to show progress on those issues.
And that's how parties in opposition normally speak, isn't it? When you don't have the power.
Yeah.
But you do have the power now. Labour does have the power. So, I mean, has this year been squandered?
I don't think that's true. There are lots of things we've made progress on, and we shouldn't pretend that progress is going to be quick or change comes about quickly. I certainly think I run an organisation called the Labour Growth Group, and we have been arguing that we need to go further, go faster, be more radical on these changes,
like what?
Given the size of the problem. Well, so I think one of our big diagnoses of the problem that we face, particularly on the economy, the reason we've struggled to grow is because Britain has struggled to build. We haven't been able to build the number of new homes that Britain needs. The home of Isambard Kingdom Brunel now apparently can't build a railway line that runs from the south of England to the north, not least because we've wasted money on a £120 million pointless bat tunnel that almost certainly won't save the life of a single bat. And when Russian tanks rolled into Europe, we were dangerously reliant on foreign oil and gas because we failed to build enough energy infrastructure in recent years. And this is because of many reasons, but it's because of a broken regulatory system and a broken planning system that we need to fix. Now, we've done some of those things. I can talk about the nerdy bits, but there is far more that we need to do to ensure that we can build the homes, the energy infrastructure, the new industries of the future on a pace that is necessary to fix our broken economy.
But then explain to me the dynamics of why, if these are the things that need to be done, the political management has been somewhat lacklustre in terms of, you look at the welfare row, which by the time many people will be listening to this will know what the scale of the rebellion is, and whether Starmer's home and dry or whether his leadership has been compromised, whatever. But why did the leadership get it so wrong and was so out of touch and out of tune, apparently, with Labour backbenchers on this?
It's never going to be easy to manage a parliamentary Labour Party as large as the one that we've got, given how successful we were at the last election. I think some of the difficulty, we face this in welfare, and I think there's going to be other issues similar to this over the next few years, is because of the size of the hole that this country got into, and I'd argue under the last Tory government, because of the amount of digging we're going to have to do to get out of it, that's going to involve some really, really tough political decisions.
But the party doesn't seem to want to take tough political decisions.
I think we're going to have to come to terms with the fact that we are going to have to take tough political decisions.
So do you wish you hadn't done any of the climb downs that we've seen on winter fuel or on welfare? Would you be one of those who says,
got to tough it out?
You just got to tough it out.
So you can talk about the individual decisions that are going to be tough, right? And but I think more broadly.
Well, I am doing but don't run over that one, Chris. Just tell me whether you think. Was winter fuel worth it? Was that U-turn worth it? Was it, you'll end up with a compromise on welfare which doesn't really save much money and leaves many in your party just as unhappy? I guess we always used to hear that Starmer was resolute. He was a stubborn bugger. And I don't know if that's true anymore.
Well, I mean, we've ended up in both of those cases with a more middle ground position on winter fuel, making sure that we're not giving it to the very richest, but we are ensuring the support is there for those who need it. And then similar with the vote we're going to be supporting, I'll be supporting on welfare this evening. But look, we also have to be honest. Every there is a set amount of money this country has to spend, and there are going to be difficult decisions ahead. But the other point I would make is it's why we need to be even more radical on fixing some of those other problems I've just mentioned. So if you take, God, this is really nerdy, if you take the changes to the NPPF that we did in December,
NPPF,
the way we do, the way our planning system works, we liberalise that to ensure that we can build on grey belt land and a few other things. Just because of that decision, in the spring statement, there was an extra £6 billion that's going to be in the economy by the end of this Parliament. That means fewer difficult political decisions because we made a brave political decision to get this country building again. So every time, for all of our regulators, for all of our regulation, we start to liberalise the British economy, make the pro-growth decisions. That means fewer of those difficult decisions on things like welfare, on things like winter fuel allowance in the future. That's why we've got to be bold and radical, and every single member of this government needs to be far more bold and radical and pushing on that direction.
But the lesson that we are learning from the whole welfare reform measure is the complete opposite. That people are not brave and radical. That people are kind of giving in, and to the people who say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, this will upset my constituents. And so actually introducing reform is virtually impossible.
I think.
And a lot of people go, let me just add one little bit to it. And also targeting Morgan McSweeney as the Chief of Staff as being responsible for a lot of this.
I'll come back to Morgan in a minute. I mean, this government is, if your question to me is this government being as bold, as radical as I would like? No, probably not, but I'm probably on the sort of quite far end of wanting boldness and radicalism to get us out of the situation that we're in. But at the same time, I can acknowledge that I think they've done quite a lot, which often doesn't get talked about enough. That is pretty bold and radical. You think about, the previous government didn't want to keep getting criticism over the NHS, so it palmed all the difficult decisions off to a pretty useless quango in NHS England. We're reversing that. We're saying we're going to take back the political control to fix the NHS, and in 4 years' time, you can decide whether we've done a good or bad job on it. We're bringing the railways back into public ownership. We're finally standing up to the water companies that have been dumping literal shit into our rivers. We are doing the biggest and boldest planning reforms in decades to get this country building again. So, those kind of things are brave. Is it as brave as I'd like? Not always, but they're pretty bold, radical changes that the previous government just did not have the bravery to do.
You said you'd get back to Morgan McSweeney. You're pretty close to him. Is his job safe?
Of course it is. Look, if you take the diagnosis that I've just said, I have not come across one person in my entire political career, and I've known Morgan for many years, I've not come across one person in politics who gets that point more, who understands the genuine concerns of working people across this country and is determined to fix them. And he is a great asset to this government. He was a great asset to the party. He's the reason we managed to fight an election campaign rooted in the values of working people in this country. And having a man like him at the top of Downing Street, I think is really important in ensuring that we can turn this country around.
So one of the things that Emily and I were discussing before you came in was, is the declinist view of Britain a sort of realistic snapshot of the country that we see, whether it's waiting to see a GP or the state of our roads or kind of, social disorder or whatever it happens to be? Is that real, or is it an ideology almost being used by the right to kind of say that there is something very dark and, going on in Britain right now?
I really don't. I really think it would be dangerous for us to fall into this narrative of, us with sort of centre-left social democratic politics think that everything's broadly fine, and it's only the radical right that accept things are broken. I think we need to accept how broken things are as well. And the argument needs to be whose diagnosis is best able to fix it. And this government needs to accept, some of those real problems that people are facing in their lives. And I see them in my constituency, in my surgeries every single week. A real determination to acknowledge the size of those challenges and work to fix them. I don't think we should dismiss the size of that challenge.
So when you read posts, and they've definitely sort of gained attraction in recent weeks, saying, I came into London on the tube and all I heard around me was foreign languages, and I was worried about getting my phone out in case it was nicked, and I saw people covered up in burqas whose eyes I couldn't meet. I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of whether you'd agree that that is alienating and isolating and scary for people who don't live in London coming in, or whether you think they need to be told that that's not right.
Of course that's not right. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that immigration's been too high, we need to bring it down. That's not really the point, I don't think, of these posts. I don't think that's what you're saying.
What is the point?
I think the point of those posts is trying to blame the brilliant, fantastic, creative, inspirational, multicultural city that we live in for the problems this country faces. That is not the cause of the problems this country faces. The cause of the problem this country faces is that when we try to build a railway line from London to Manchester, our regulators hold it up for years, our politicians are not brave enough to make a decision, and we end up wasting £120 million of hard-earned taxpayers' money on a bloody bat tunnel. Now, you multiply that problem off across all of the things in this country, that's what's caused the problem. And unless we work really hard to fix that, then, yes, of course, these narratives about it being the problem of immigration and immigrants is going to be the narrative that takes hold. But that's why we've got to fix it.
Island of strangers. I mean, you've just gulped, Chris. I mean, what was, was Starmer warming to that narrative? Did he hear, the whole declinist Britain, I can't get on a train without seeing foreigners, Was that what he was doing in the Island of Strangers, and was he right to do that, or is he right now to have withdrawn that line?
He's right to have withdrawn that line, I think, because, and I think he's acknowledged this, because of the similarities between some of the language used and some of the language used by Enoch Powell. I don't think he meant to do that, but I think the more general point.
But actually, it's not just. I mean, I don't mean it's not just. It's not just. Powell of the 60s, is it? It's whoever those voices are today. And I guess what I'm asking you is, do those voices resonate, or do you just say this is not where we want to be as a Labour Party?
I think if you sort of ignore, if we widen it out and look at the wider section of that speech, I would say that there is a broader point there that I think is legitimate and true, which is in any country, integration needs to be happening quicker than immigration. And when that doesn't happen, a country ends up in a bad place. And that means, firstly, we cannot have the incredibly high levels of immigration that we had after the post-Brexit Boris wave, where we were seeing immigration running into, nearly 1 million people coming every year. No country can sustain that. We need to have more controls on immigration than that. And secondly, we need to be working much harder on integration and putting more resources and funding into that. And both of those things are true. And I think it is right to acknowledge that if we don't fix that, any country will end up facing real consequences.
I just want to clarify something that Emily just asked you, which is, was the mistake in using the phrase Island of Strangers because it sounded vaguely Powellite, or was it just the phrase itself?
We've got to be pretty careful about the language that we use in this debate, and to ensure that we aren't inflaming tensions. Given, I think the Prime Minister's acknowledged that he could have been more careful in the words that he uses. But I think the point I'm trying to make is there was an attempt in that section of the speech, or at least the way I heard it, to make the argument that I was just making, and I think that is an important argument to make. So while I think that there's regret about some of the language used, I don't think we should dismiss that wider argument, which I think would be wrong to not start to address.
Chris Curtis, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much indeed. It is 3:00 in the afternoon in the studio, and before we go, we are 4 hours away from the vote this evening. And Mateless and I are going to do something bloody stupid now, which is try and work out what the result is going to be.
We're going to take a bet on something.
All we're going to do is show what frigging idiots we are.
OK, I'm going to just duck that one completely. But I am going to say that the Times has got a breakdown of how they think this vote on welfare reform will play out. And they believe that the most likely outcome would be that they win, but they face a sizable revolt. Now, you can choose what a sizable revolt is. Is it 40 people voting against? Is it more if you include abstentions? Could it be up to 60? You know, I guess what's going to happen now is that anyone on the government side will tell us it's going to be very close and they could easily be defeated. And anyone on the rebel side will say, we don't think we've got enough, because that's kind of expectation management. And by the time you listen to this, it will all be immaterial, but we will bring you the result tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it will be a government majority of 50 or so, and Keir Starmer will go, "We won," and the rebels will say, "You've been given a bloody nose, and you need to learn from it."
And nothing will happen to them. That's the question, isn't it?
No, nothing will happen
to them.
I mean, I think the chances of getting a ministerial preferment are probably being set back a year or two, but no, can't afford to. He can't afford to have this many people up against him on a permanent basis. So he's got to make peace with these people.
And you can enjoy listening to all this after you know more than us. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.